Anyway, Mark, so I was excited. I called Nima because I was coming into the studio this morning, and I was like, hear about this thing in North Dakota, Christian Cole Personhood. And Nima was like, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's talk to Mark.
So here we are.
So let's start off with my understanding, and maybe we could jump from there and Nima can get into the criticism. So the big thing, like if North Dakota is introducing, or Cole Christensen is introducing into the state legislature a bill to limit personhood to actual people, which is to say it excludes rocks and trees and bugs and monkeys and elephants and dogs and all that sort of stuff. Because if those things can get the rights of personhood like we do, now we can be charged for murder for running over a bug, right? However, the like you mentioned yesterday in our class, and Cole mentioned this when I talked to him this morning, the big win appears here to be that the committee did not attempt to remove the language also taking personhood away from corporations. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's a first in world history. It's a big deal since the 12th century when corporations, the idea of a public-private partnership originates. And the advancement of that you can see through like the charters that between the kings and queens of England and the colonies of the United States. And then the advancement of that into the 19th century with Washington, D.C. becoming a corporation, for example. And then into the 20th and 21st century, this idea that government should be classified as a corporation, or corporations should be given legal personhood status. From animals to nature to artificial intelligence to corporations to government entities, those 5 areas come into conflict with human beings, and what human beings mean in the 21st century. Are we as humans superior, equal to, or inferior to non-human entities that are given or recognized legal personhood status? So that what they did yesterday in their committee is the first time in world history, literally the first time in world history that government officials in a meeting about this very important issue of personhood literally passed out of their committee for the first time in world history that humans are not equal to or inferior to government entities or municipal corporations or private corporations, artificial intelligence, nature, and animals. That first time in world history. It should be on every single news channel worldwide, just because it's a historic. Even if you disagree with it, it's still a historic moment.
So I get the impact when we talk about the nature of the animals, the artificial intelligence. What Nima and I were discussing is what's the importance in the sense of corporations, both I guess, in quotes, capitalistic corporations and government corporations.
So human beings, we naturally, because we see things in pictures psychologically. We see images. We don't see symbols. We see images. So like when in our classes, we ask people, when you hear the word government, what's the first image you see? Normally 9 out of 10 will say a building or a person, but actually government is made up of the meaning of words. So the word corporation doesn't mean much to people. Like you say the word corporation, they might see Walmart in their head, right? Or Amazon. But there's a downside when humans think that government or a corporation is equal to a person. It gives the people who have control of it more influence than the average person. So that corporation becomes a protection, like a buffer state between those who are controlling the corporation and the people who think the corporation is a person. And I don't mean literally like Nima. When I see Nima, I see a human being, right? But if Nima creates a corporation, we'll call it Nima Incorporated, right? that corporation provides him benefit. There's liability protections, there's protections. But when the people interact with the corporation, with the average people, they're not interacting with NEMA, they're interacting with NEMA Incorporated, right? Now let's apply that to government. If NEMA is in control of government NEMA Incorporated, and the average people are interacting with NEMA Government Incorporated, if NEMA controls everything about NEMA Government Incorporated, it literally has the kind of effect you see right now amongst the population. People are divided, people feel oppressed, people lose faith, people start to storm Capitol buildings, people start protesting Supreme Court justices, right? And it doesn't get better, it gets worse. And this is the one thing that human history has not dealt with since the 12th century is, what do we do when the governed, who are affected by NEMA Government Incorporated, right, feel oppressed? Their natural instinct is to crash that system. But it's actually NEMA who's controlling NEMA Government Incorporated. That's the actual, it's like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain.
So does that mean that liability is shifted to NEMA the person from NEMA Incorporated, NEMA the government? What is that the effect, the practical outcome of this ultimately, I guess?
That could be the fear that attorneys and legislators who also fear liability would perceive. But in actuality, the system, the government entity, given personhood status, gives the people behind the government protection. So making it so that the people realize that the government entity is not a person levels the playing field and doesn't reduce the liability or the liability coverage. It reduces levels the playing field so that the people are able to have human interaction with a human person. For example, the FBI, that is an entity. Mm-hmm. The agents in the FBI are humans. Right now, whistleblowers are coming forward to Congress saying, hey, we are being told by leadership to weaponize the entity called the FBI against average American citizens. So this is not about decreasing the liability coverage of those FBI agents. It's to help level the playing field for the average citizen, where you have leadership that are causing FBI agents to weaponize the entity against the people who are relying on it for protection. So could it have the consequence of decreasing liability for FBI agents who are being weaponized, or does it increase oversight of FBI leadership who are weaponizing FBI agents who then weaponize? It becomes it's a spider web. So we're not eliminating protections. We're increasing the playing field for the governed so that they don't see the government, the FBI, as an entity that is attacking them. They can actually go in and say, wait a minute, is that the FBI agent who came to me that is the problem? Or is it the FBI leadership who's weaponizing an FBI agent who's weaponizing the FBI against me? We're breaking down those artificial barriers. Now, in the long term, it could have an effect on decreasing their liability coverage. It could, for example, I'll give you an example. So the weaponization of the 1996 Anti-Terrorism Act to reduce the liability of Department of Justice prosecutors when they withhold exculpatory evidence like they are for the January 6 folks, 960 of them, 2.5 years later, right? At some point, somebody has to say, time out, wait a second, okay? You're weaponizing the law, hiding behind the corporation, the personhood of government. That should not be a thing in society.
Right. So when you're committing crimes, when you're harming people under the guise of an entity, you should be held accountable personally for what you're doing. To the extent that Yeah, to the extent that you've had an influence in making those decisions, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's the key here is we're not trying to eliminate the value of corporate personhood. We're trying to level the playing field for the people who are affected by corporate personhood.
Well, also, it seems like at the moment, the corporations enjoy all the benefits of legal rights, but then they're shielded from the consequences of, they're shielded from liability for bad things that they do to other people.
Now we go into the jurisprudence area.
Right.
And that is why the corporate personhood is so important to the average person, because this is beyond their scope of. I'm not trained to be an attorney, right? I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to be one. But the key is what you're describing, Nima, is that they're able to hide behind the liability protections that were intended for good.
Yeah.
When there's a possibility that criminal activity was involved.
Right.
And that's the key here, is leveling the playing field. We're not trying to eliminate the original intention of liability coverage. We're trying to level the playing field when it crosses into criminal behavior, but I'm hiding behind corporate personhood benefit.
Vaccine manufacturers come to mind, for example. They have all the benefits of the fantastic profits that they make, but they don't, they're not held to account for the damages caused, and that's a problem, obviously. And also, so what you're saying, I'm also not a lawyer, but I'm familiar with the concept of piercing the corporate veil. That is already a thing, but it sounds to me that's become harder and harder to do, right? And so just making that easier to do that would already be a big benefit for the common man.
For the common man, when they realize and recognize corporate personhood and public corporate personhood have a consequence that need a 21st century evaluation.
So essentially what we're saying here is, and I think I'm repeating what you guys just discussed, is, okay, whether or not corporations should have liability protection is another conversation. We'll just, for the sake of right now, assume that liability protection in certain senses is good. However, that liability protection should not extend if the person in charge or has some sort of authority within that corporation starts doing criminal actions.
Especially in the public sector when it's called government. So for example, if a school district has juridical personhood or artificial personhood, and the attorney is able to influence the school board members who are duly elected by the common man, that attorney's influence over protecting the corporate personhood of the school district should be counterbalanced by the common man's participation. For example, parents have shown up for the last year, and we've had thousands of parents cited and trespassed using the government corporate personhood side of the equation. So that limits the common man's participation in political dialogue, human to human. It's called body politic, body corporate. In the scale of influence, the body corporate ends up having more weight because the attorney is representing the school district, and the school district is considered a legal person. So the protection of the person ends up trumping the interest of the humans who are showing up expecting to have a body politic relationship, are now being counterbalanced by the body corporate side, and that's having a negative consequence. Again, a 21st century, the way it's being portrayed, they're being portrayed as unruly Walmart customers who are threatening the existence of Walmart. So the word threat, coercion, intimidation, now you see weaponization of FBI, weaponization of DHS, Office of Direct. And we're not just talking about corporate like Exxon Valdez anymore. We're now talking about DOJ that can destroy your life, like hold you in prison indefinitely. FBI can storm your house and shoot you. Office of Director of National Intelligence can spy on you. You know what I'm saying? I could just go down that rabbit hole for hours. It's a different ball game at that point when you're competing with the shareholders of Walmart. But now you're competing with the senior leadership in charge of a corporate personhood called the DOJ. Or the school board, and the attorney is now trained to represent the corporate personhood of the school district, but the parents are coming expecting to have a body politic conversation with their school board members. But the school board members are trained to be afraid of those parents. Something's got to give in the 21st century. We've got to have an evaluation. How do we protect the liability protections that come with corporate personhood versus the abuse of that protection?
Well, so I think another big issue nowadays is these billionaire NGOs, which are also essentially corporations, and their advocacy and the money they spend on ballot measures and things like that. They have so much money pooled together from all kinds of different investors, shareholders, etc. And one person can deploy that money with huge effect, huge impact on the population. But
an example, Nima, is the National Governors Association. It's a private organization that consists of memberships of 50 elected officials that Bill Gates can influence through his relationship with one of his best friends out of the state of North Dakota, Doug Burgum. And I'm not saying that that's what I'm saying. What we're saying is, in terms of equality and balancing the playing field here, is one person through corporate personhood or public corporate personhood, like an attorney in a school district, or Bill Gates through NGO, can have tremendous amount of influence over the direction.
Right. And that used to not be so easy, right? From what I understand, I just read a little bit from the American Bar Association on the history of corporate personhood, etc. And they talk about here how, for example, in the 1970s, Santa Clara was used to justify granting corporations the First Amendment right to spend unlimited corporate funds on ballot initiatives, in the case Bellotti. And then Citizens United came way later, but they talk about how Citizens United was basically just a culmination of a long history of pushing more and more for corporate personhood. And that should not be so easy, I guess. It makes sense. They shouldn't have such an easy time spending all this money that they're supposed to be in charge of in a fiduciary relationship with shareholders, etc. They're not supposed to spend all that money as though they were a person just making advocacy.
And this comes back to the notion of the 21st century reevaluation, not of the efficacy of personhood, but the balance that an inanimate object can acquire tremendous amount of influence compared to a vast majority of human beings. And that piece, I think, is the key to driving this debate in the 21st century, or being a part of it. It's like, wait a second, are human beings superior, equal, or inferior to non-human entities?
Right. Like
which
also
includes animals, nature, artificial intelligence, not just private corporations, but I would say even more significantly, government corporations as well.
Mm-hmm. And also a lot of times these giant institutions / corporations, associations are used to drive home talking points as though they were as though the entity can express an opinion. The American Physicists Association declares that climate change is real, as if that is meaningful, when in reality it's just a power play, and it should be visible to the public that that's what it is. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be peddled as some kind of truth
edict
that has more weight, an edict that has more weight than everyone else's viewpoint.
Yes. We can see this through the Twitter files. We can see this through the censorship of Facebook. We can see this through the leadership in these very important organizations. We can see this through corporate diversity, equity, inclusion training, etc. The intentions probably are fantastic, but there is a consequence to training the human population that this entity has personhood, and that somehow they are inferior to that personhood.
Right. The entity has announced something, and so it's meaningful by default. You know, that's ridiculous.
To me, that's a mic drop moment to be able to clearly state. It's like, for the human person to understand in the next 2 to 4 years that corporate personhood is a thing that's been around for a long time. It has precedence and it has value. However, it also has a consequence if not conversed and discussed. And in the simplistic way that you just portrayed it, the entity makes an edict and somehow that's superior. Wait a minute. Time out. Look at the censorship. Look at the cost to human beings in the calculation in the 21st century. There's a cost, and we should calculate that cost.
So let's bring this back to North Dakota of what just happened in the House committee. So we've got a state representative that put forward a bill that said, okay, let's define personhoods. I haven't read it, but I presume let's define persons as human beings and not artificial intelligence, trees, nature, animals, and corporations, and
also government corporations. That is huge. That is a first in world history, because if you go back, and I'm sorry to temporarily derail. If you go back in time, the idea of corporate personhood and public-private partnerships does not originate in the 20th and 21st century. It goes back centuries. And England is a major component of this, of course, but you had private-public partnerships between the London Company and the monarchy of England in the creation of colonies in the what we now know as the United States. That public-private partnership is a government corporation colluding with a private corporation and becoming one entity. Okay? So the fact that in this, to me, is like, for me, yesterday is like a Magna Carta moment.
Yeah.
It actually stimulates a tremendous amount of emotion for me, because for humans to be a part of that conversation is massively progressive. It's beyond my words to say, but the fact that they were able to list animals, nature, and artificial intelligence, that's new to our time frame, but listing private corporations and government corporations in this, and for it to pass is a mind-blowing moment.
And it passed 12-1, right, in this committee.
Yes. Yeah. That again, did it slip through? Do we have the opportunity in the 21st century to help stimulate this discussion about a 21st century evaluation of this? I got to tell you, it's a monumental. For me personally, it's a monumental moment in human
do you have by any chance a number for the bill or something like that I can pull up? I'm just curious.
Yeah, let me just ask Cole.
Oh, I was going to text him here too. I'll let you do it.
No, go for it. He sent it to me. I just right now, Nima, I can't remember where it's at in my sphere of technology. Is it on my computer? He did send it. So I apologize. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm just looking through his bills here. He's been busy. He's been a busy beaver, it seems. So there's a lot of bills, there's some listed for tomorrow, committee hearing tomorrow.
Yeah, he's
one for tomorrow, another one for tomorrow, one today, another one today, one yesterday. Boom, boom.
Let me just say this, Nima. If you could give me a room full of young people that want to become state reps, I could say that Cole Christensen is the example of the perfect Center for Self-Governance student. He's followed my training exactly. He has followed all the advice on how not to be confrontational to the T. Everything he has done to the T. And now he is...
Oh, I got it, I think. I got it here. Relating to personhood status. Okay. So...
There it is. There's your version right there. You have to click on that version on the left.
Oh, okay, I see. Got it. A bill to create and enact, blah, blah, blah. Relating to personhood status, okay. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law, an individual's rights are superior and not equal. Jesus, Windows. Windows is sabotaging me here. Remind me tomorrow. Not equal to environmental elements, artificial intelligence, animals, inanimate objects, corporations, or governmental entities. Environmental. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if you, Mark, if you ever heard of this anecdote regarding Maurice Strong, the climate crusader of the UN.
Yes.
Former big oil executive who stated once, he went through all the grandiose futures that he has in mind for the rights of trees and the rights of rabbits. And somebody in the audience asked him, what about human rights? And he snapped back and said, well, you can call yourself lucky if you still have the rights of a tree when all is said and done.
So again, to me, quietly, if it was accidental because their attorneys weren't paying so close attention or something, I don't know, but it is a historic moment for sure that they were able to pass it out of a committee. Obviously, if they pass it, that will be another historical milestone. If this can be repeated in other states, it will be monumental for the United States for sure.
Very nice.
So because Cole has been going through our training on leadership and self-governance, and I know that his views, he's not like a mainstream Republican or a Democrat or whatever, but as his character and his willingness to learn have been two critical components. So when I introduced the idea of it's important that we introduce some kind of personhood, Idaho actually passed a similar version of this last year of this, but the corporations struck out corporations and government entities. So this is the first state in the nation to keep that piece in there. But they got the animals, nature, artificial, that has passed in Idaho. And then I told Cole, I said, Cole, if you can keep the corporations and the government entities in there and they don't freak out, that's smooth,
just keep your mouth shut and move forward. Yeah.
Right. Because in Idaho, they did panic. And so I told him, I said, well, then just go ahead and mend out the government entities and the government corporations. We'll use that later. Why are they so focused on those two? Why protect them?
Right.
Well, I mean, I think I have to admit that it also stood out to me when Dylan told me about it, because immediately what comes to mind is what about, like, for example, I have an LLC. What would that mean for me? What would that mean for liability protection, etc.? I think these are the questions that come to mind. So it may almost make sense to separate the two, like one for corporate and government personhood, the other for all the other things, and then attack those separately.
For me, I didn't think this would happen in my lifetime. I thought I would plant the seeds. But the fact that we can have the conversation about government should not be thought of as a person in humanity. It should never be treated as a person, ever, ever, ever. Because of the mic drop that you said, and I would just love to steal that from you, is the entity gives the edict and somehow it appears like time out.
Yeah.
Especially in the government world, where we can use government as a weapon to kill each other, to take each other's stuff.
Right. The entity doesn't say anything. The entity can't speak, doesn't exist as a concept. There's some people in that entity, maybe even only one or two people who have an opinion, and here's their opinion. Right. That's how you look at it. It's not like somebody handed it down from above.
Just like, for me, it's like I was expecting that the government entity conversation. I've been waiting for 13 years. I haven't been vocal about it because I can tell that the human beings are naturally trained to think that it is a person, right? Right, Dylan? That's what I teach. I said, don't think and speak of government as a person. It's terrible consequence. So anyway, to have this conversation with you, sorry for my passion. I kind of derails, but
we wanted we wanted to have the call for a passion. Yeah,
we want the passion.
Yeah. So maybe we could theorize a second here. Let's look at North Dakota. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that this thing actually makes it all the way through both houses. The governor signs off on it, which I doubt. But for the sake of argument, let's say this happens.
That would be huge. Because then people are going to be like, they're literally, how dogs, when they make a noise, they kind of tilt their head.
Yeah.
For humans, this is a tilt the head moment. Why wouldn't he support that? Because they can't, they've been able to obfuscate it for centuries. But to have the ability for Governor Burgum to veto that, and you've got a 24-year-old young man who's fighting for personhood as a youth. Guys, I can't tell you that is a pivotal moment for the youth, because for them to be able to articulate in clear language, it's like, listen, I don't like racists either, but don't punch me because someone told you that I am. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just to be able to have the conversation in clear terms like this is profound. So I hope, I'm maybe I'm not supposed to say it out loud. I hope the governor of North Dakota decides that humans should not be equal in the 21st century. I hope he does veto that so that we can have that debate. I hope he doesn't, so that we can advance humans beyond that. But if he's willing to sacrifice himself on the argument table, then so be it.
This is wild. I don't even know.
It's
like, is that when you were talking about it last night at the class?
If I was Murdoch or whatever his name is for Fox News, this would be frontline story, because it's so historic that a group of humans in a committee, a group of humans that have.
Uh-oh, we're losing you, Mark. Neva, can you hear me? Is everybody frozen?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think we just lost the final words of what you were just saying, Mark.
Just it's an epic moment in history that a committee of humans in control of government passed out of that committee an entity that said that individuals are not inferior to government entities.
And trees.
And animals. Yeah, it's mind-blowing. So I really hope that this seed at least stimulates the debate, even if it fails in North Dakota in the bigger sense of the chambers of the House or whatever, that this stimulates the conversation in the 21st.
Right. I mean, even if the governor vetoes it, I'd love for him to explain publicly why humans shouldn't have more rights than a tree. I really wanted to elaborate on that thoroughly and for everyone to hear it.
And it would be so cool to send Dylan to North Dakota and Paul to ask the governor that question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm down with that. Do you think Cole could get me in front of the governor to ask that question?
He meets with the governor regularly.
I like this idea.
And guys, I'm gonna throw this out there one more time, is to be able to train leaders like Cole, to empower him to be able to do that, it literally is started with his character, but our training is focused on getting them to think systematically and not ideologically.
Right. Because if he came in swinging like, I'm a Republican and all you Democrats are gonna, then this would have got nowhere.
And now he had the full support of the speaker. He has a support of the assistant speaker. He's been navigating. There's another bill he's working on called Parenthood. And this is another issue it's a big deal for the 21st century, is evaluating, should there be parents in the 21st century? People that support this, trees are humans too. Their view is that there is no such thing as a male and a female coordinating together to raise a child in the 21st century. They want to eliminate that altogether. And I understand there's horrendous parents out there, but that's not 99% of humanity. Again.
I like this approach of honing in on things that they're planning for the distant future, but not telling us about, but putting in these roadblocks to where once it comes to that, where they actually try to give trees more rights than us, they can't do it because of these resolutions, because of these provisions.
Resolutions, policies, proclamations, ordinances, laws. And if I had it my way, I mean, Nima, the fact that we're having this conversation, and I'm just going to say it out loud, I haven't. Constitutional amendments.
Yep. Yes.
Declarations, even declarations of human rights.
Right. Where we add to the Bill of Rights and say, okay, here's the 11th Bill of Right.
Humans are not inferior to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
because of some edict that came from an entity that people think is a living person. I know it sounds so dystopian and like
and ridiculous, but we're there. We're totally there.
We're there.
Yeah,
we're there. So glorious, fantastic. I can tell you, yesterday was a monumental day for me. January 6th, when Jim Jordan got the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. That was an epic moment. January is going to be January to this day is going to be, in my historic books, are going to be one of the profoundest months in my life.
What I also like, what I just noticed, is that it says here emergency. This act is declared to be an emergency measure. I love that, because that's what they've been doing to us for the past 3+ years. And so, yeah, this is an emergency. There's psychopaths who want to take your rights away, so it's an emergency. I like that.